Well, thank you, colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Nevin Knezovich, Education Emergency Specialist working with our lovely education team at HQ. And we are thrilled to be co-convening this webinar with our colleagues from INE on learning in humanitarian contexts. And I will be your moderator today, and hopefully I will do a good job and not put anyone to sleep today, because it is such an important and exciting topic that we'll be discussing, of course. Learning in humanitarian contexts and how we can collectively work together to address one of the major challenges of our time, and that's the global learning crisis for children, which is particularly felt by children affected by different types of emergencies across the world. So we'll be starting off today's webinar with some introductory comments from Robert Jenkins, who is the Global Director of Education for UNICEF, and Manal Haidifi, who works on these issues with partners across the world. And we'll be following that with a few very short presentations from colleagues working on these issues, starting with a short presentation on framing what we're working on with this learning brief in humanitarian settings, to give partners and participants a sense of the work in this space at the moment and what we're hoping to achieve through your collaboration in this webinar. And then a short presentation on the development of a toolkit to improve holistic learning by a colleague from UNICEF, Carolyn Walton, who works in our Eastern and Southern Africa and regional office, together with Matteo Valenza. And then learning in EIE presentation from colleagues in Uganda and Myanmar, presented by Save the Children colleagues, Kirsten Muccio. And then, of course, a presentation on Better Learning Program by Camila Lodi from NRC. And then we'll have a series of breakout rooms for colleagues to help us craft the learning brief as we move forward. So on that note, maybe let me hand it over first to Robert and Manal for their comments. So Robert and Manal, over to you.
Manal, would you like to go first, or I'm not sure, whatever's best.
No, it's okay.
Manal,
hello, Rob.
please.
No, yeah, it's your turn, Rob, now. You can begin, then I will be after you.
Okay, well, thanks, Nevin. Thanks, Manal. Great to be with you now. Great to be with so many colleagues. Let me just begin by thanking everyone for joining. I know how busy everyone is, particularly many of you are humanitarians, so I know the demands on your time. Really appreciate it. Let me also thank INE for co-organizing this event. Thanks to all the presenters, and I'm really looking forward to this engagement. I think we all know, I won't go into the challenge that is currently being faced, maybe just to set the scene. We do use the figure 222 million children are affected by crisis globally, school-age children. We know that we continue as an education community to struggle with convincing governments, donors, partners to prioritize education emergencies. We all know that the most marginalized children are most affected by emergencies, and that includes in their ability to continue to attend school, but also in learning loss. So what's absolutely critical is, as per this seminar too, in this webinar, that we figure out a way to work better together, better and more effective, more efficient and effective in the field in order to improve learning in humanitarian action. I think those of us who have been in the sector for a long time, in the humanitarian sector also, particularly in education, I know are struggling with improving quality, measuring learning, and recognizing the importance of learning. I think it is fair to say we have overly been prioritizing the importance of enabling some form of access to learning, or not even learning, access to sort of some kind of support in emergency settings, not knowing actually whether it indeed has improved learning, whether indeed it has made any impact on. So that's the big shift that I think we're all working on making, ensuring learning happens for those marginalized, affected by humanitarian crisis. And that's the topic of today. I'll just throw out, if it's okay, Nevin and Manal, some ideas on how that could possibly take place. And again, we'll look forward to the panelists and others. One is, of course, the importance of keeping children in school or in learning. So there's obviously we need to do all we can to enable children to continue to attend a learning facility or learning environment. Second, assessment of learning. Now that's not only in humanitarian context, that's a lesson from development and in high-income countries. It's very challenging to talk about or improve learning if we don't know if kids are learning or their state of learning. So second, I propose is importance of assessing learning on a very regular basis. Third, prioritizing, focusing on key points in a child's learning trajectory: early childhood education, foundational learning. So a priority to those basic key foundational learning skills that are needed for children to be successful along their learning journey. Fourth, we all recognize, and as I mentioned at the beginning, the importance of efficiency in the way learning is delivered, efficiency in instruction, efficiency in the pedagogy of learning, including catch-up learning programs. I think if we were all to get on a plane now and visit many of the current humanitarian settings and look at the levels of education that's being provided, this would continue to be a challenge. The fifth and last I'll raise is the importance of meeting the broader needs of children, including their psychosocial and mental health. Now, the only challenging thing I'll propose to this seminar is, I think those 5 points have been much discussed for many, many years. I don't think there's anything new. What somehow needs to be cracked is, how do we deliver this at scale in humanitarian crisis together? The good news is a lot of us are very key actors in that space. And so I think we have the wherewithal to make this difference. But I'd encourage us to spend this time together to get into the how. How do we realize those 5? Not spend too much more time on the need nor the importance of. I think by attending this webinar, we can take that, we all feel that is given. So maybe just to wrap up, I think I would encourage us to focus on foundational literacy and numeracy. I would encourage us to recognize social emotional learning. And lastly, recognize that in order to improve learning, we need to improve our monitoring systems, ultimately down to within the learning process itself, the teacher, learning facilitator, having the data, having the information of the level of learning so that they can influence it. Thanks again, Nevin. Thanks to all, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thanks so much, Rob. Wonderful comments. Manal, over to you.
Yes, thanks, my colleague. First, my greetings to everyone here with us today in this distinguished and important meeting in the light of the difficult circumstances and the successive crises that afflict more than one country, which negatively affects a basic sector that is the education. I thank you for giving me this valuable opportunity to speak in my capacity as the principal of Kamal Jumblat Official School, a public relations officer of the Association of Basic Education Teachers in Lebanon, and the chair of Standing Committee of the Arabic countries affiliated to Education International. There is no doubt that the first affected category in every crisis is the educational sector and its repercussions on the students, the teachers, and the quality of education, thus depriving those thousands of students of their right to education, which is endorsed by the Human Rights Charter and emphasized by the 2030 Agenda within the Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, we must all, as custodians of this message, make every effort to mitigate the impact of this crisis. And since UNICEF is one of the global organizations that seek in all its programs to include steps to find solutions, it must be a strategic partner with all stakeholders, not only the governments and the policymakers, but also with education unions that ensure the continuity of and the quality of education, especially in countries that are under the weight of crisis. If any economic, political, or wars, as is the case with most Arabic countries, such as Tunisia, Morocco, Palestine, Yemen, Bahrain, Syria, Lebanon, and multiple others. If we want to invest in education, we must first, as partners, work to secure the needs of students, the teachers, and the school consecutively, and this is the triangle on which the education process is based. The welfare of the students and the well-being of teachers is the foundation for how can teachers perform the mission of education when they do not have the lowest necessities for a decent life? How can the school secure operational requirements when its funds are empty? And thus, how can students obtain the right to education? Therefore, the support of unions is required to enable teachers to be able to continue their work, as well as training them through workshops to arm them with modern methods and keep pace with the rapid technological development and provide them with the necessary means in any circumstance that forces them to do so. We also add the principle of gender equality, the prevention of sexual harassment at work, and the suppression of trade union freedoms by governments that are working to strike public education in order to privatize it. From here, what we as representatives of teachers demand is the involvement of unions in decision-making, and that the programs launched by the international community organizations include training, empowerment, and support for teachers in all physiological, economical, and social aspects, and thus life, which guarantees the continuity and the quality of education and secures a sound educational environment for all students. In my opinion, this is the right investment in the right place at the right time, and we appeal to all those who concerned to intervene in this context to prevent reaching the red line, as is the case for the teachers in Lebanon, where today we are at the bottom in light of teachers' salaries that do not exceed $30 per month, a strike that has been going on for 2 months, and the deprivation of 350,000 Lebanese students and 170,000 Syrian refugee students are prevented from going to their schools, and 60,000 teachers remaining in the streets demanding the minimum necessities for decent life, and there is no life for those who call. Finally, I hope that from our meeting today, we will come up with recommendations to act quickly to prevent us from falling into the worst depth possible. I renew my thanks to you, and I am glad to see you, Dean and Camila also. And I will end my speech as always, and as I ended it up in Geneva, solidarity is the foundation. Go public, fund education. Education cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Manal, and wonderful and inspiring comments from you as well. Just a quick summary of those comments. I think some of the key takeaways, of course, from Rob, really guidance for us to try stay focused on solutions, around children, keeping them in school, focusing on assessing, learning, focusing on the key learning stages of children with a focus on foundational literacy and numeracy, efficiency of instruction, which links up to points from Manal, and of course, focusing on the broader needs of children affected by different emergencies by taking a focus on MHPSS, mental health and psychosocial support. And I think Manal's point, really the centrality of teachers in learning for children, focusing not only on their welfare, but skills. And they need an engaging and listening to teachers effectively moving forward. So thank you so much, Manal and Rob. Maybe now we'll switch to the first presentation, which will just be a short summary framing of the issues we're working on. Sarah, if we can go to the first slide, just a few quick data points. We won't spend much time because we'll catch up. And the correct figure here actually is 222 million children who were affected by crisis globally at the beginning of 2022 based on ECW estimates that were produced, although we are certain this number has increased because of huge new emergencies since then: Ukraine, the Horn of Africa, Pakistan, and so on. We know that around 92% of children in crisis-affected areas in Eastern and Southern Africa are unlikely to achieve minimum proficiency in reading literacy by grade 3. And this is reflective of challenges in many humanitarian contexts children experience. There's a 41% gap between children completing lower secondary school in comparison to children in non-emergency countries. And of course, 84% of children affected globally live in protracted crises. 78.2 are crisis, 78.2 million are crisis affected children of school age who are also out of school in many of these contexts. And of course, worrying trends are that it's projected these numbers will only increase over time. So this simply underscores the importance of addressing the learning crisis to avoid really a lost generation moving forward. If we can go to the next slide, Sarah, please. Thank you. So what are the goals of the learning brief we've been working on with partners? Really what we're trying to do is generate evidence that we're actually able to address the learning crisis in humanitarian context. I think this goes to some points raised by Rob about demand side barriers we often experience by different practitioners or investors in humanitarian contexts who aren't always prioritizing issues of learning. Generating evidence that we're actually already doing this and working on delivering solutions to address the learning crisis, to address this first point as well. And then, of course, really to try and generate some collective action among partners in this forum, but also beyond this forum, to rapidly scale up workable solutions to address the learning crisis, focusing on humanitarian contexts. Next slide, please, Sarah. So some of the initial steps that we've taken in this regard was to, late last year, mid-year, we started mapping out some potentially scalable solutions across the world being implemented by a number of different partners: UNICEF, SAVE, NRC, and so on, Plan International as well, and others. And we had preliminarily identified around 18 different scalable solutions across the world that focused on areas related to strengthening foundational literacy and numeracy, addressing mental health and psychosocial support for children, assessing learning and improving teacher skills. Next slide, Sarah, thank you. So an example of one of those is a really innovative and strong initiative being implemented in many contexts, teaching at the right level to improve foundational literacy and numeracy. And the reason we focused on this one is because it demonstrates that rapid gains in addressing learning losses and accelerating learning of children is actually quite doable and is being done already. And many of the examples, of course, are underpinned by the use of formative assessments by teachers. But in Niger, for example, this program led to a 17% increase in the capacity and the ability of children to read and comprehend simple paragraphs. Massive gains there. In Madagascar, even stronger gains, around a 77% increase, 77% of children who could read a simple paragraph, which was a 29% increase over only a 40-day period that this particular program was implemented. Similarly, in Nigeria, we saw major gains as well in literacy and numeracy, going from very low levels to very high levels in a relatively short period of time. Next slide, Sarah, please. Social and emotional learning, which is very much related to this notion of mental health and psychosocial support for children, really focusing on addressing the mental and physical health and providing psychosocial support for children, recognizing that this is such an essential area to address to not only build the resilience of children, but also to support them in their academic achievement. And I think we have a couple of very strong examples globally. There are actually quite a number, but a couple that we pulled out here were from Colombia and Lebanon that demonstrated not only the reach of these really important initiatives, but the correlation between addressing social emotional learning needs and mental health psychosocial support issues and learning for children. If we go to the next slide, please. Then, of course, this issue around measuring learning in emergency settings. Now, there are often many different views on this, but our sense of this has been that the importance of measuring learning in EI really helps to support teachers in adjusting pedagogical approaches to support learner needs, helping teachers better target instruction to cognitive and non-cognitive learning abilities and needs of children, equipping teachers with the skills to overcome learning losses and support accelerated learning for children in numerous contexts, but particularly in humanitarian settings. And of course, improving plans for school improvement plans in facilities to support learning for children as well, by addressing their different needs. Now, if we go to the next slide, Sarah, now there are a couple of really interesting examples that have emerged over the last period around successes in this area that we identified through the initial mapping. One of them, of course, was the PAL network in Tanzania that reached some 15,000 children following a countrywide assessment on learning progress. And as a result of the launch of these assessments in Tanzania, 80% of children who were supported improved their foundational literacy and numeracy skills. So really demonstrating why the use of assessment tools is so critical in supporting learning, because of some of the reasons outlined a moment ago. A couple of other really innovative, interesting examples we identified were the holistic assessment for learning implemented by our colleagues from Save the Children, which is really a tool for measuring learning, literacy, numeracy, and social emotional skills that was initially piloted in northern Syria and is really taking shape and promising some really innovative solutions moving forward. And of course, the All Children Learning Assessment Platform, which is being launched through the UNICEF Foundational Literacy and Numeracy Hub. And this is a platform that provides practitioners on the ground with a series of resources that they can implement across countries to support children's improved learning across numerous different contexts. If we go to the next slide. Now, one of the things that we also have tried to do is really focus on what are emerging innovations for scaling up assessments in EIE, and we have a couple of colleagues who will speak to some of these today, so I won't go into too much details, but several of the ones that we've identified were around Save the Children International's remote assessment of learning, the REAL tool. Our colleagues from UNICEF Innocenti have done some really innovative work around the use of mobile phones for phone-based assessments to support learning in EIE settings. Our colleagues from ISARO, the Eastern and Southern Africa Regional Office, are working now on finalizing a toolkit for measuring learning in EIE settings that we think will have really transformative impacts in numerous settings across the world. And of course, the psychosocial SEL toolkit by the ESO lab from Harvard, working with partners, some of whom are on the call today. And then, of course, one of the other things we're really hoping to land on over the next little while and through this webinar are what are some of the other really promising, innovative practices that are worth scaling up globally to address the learning crisis in humanitarian settings. Now, some of the next steps, if we can go to the next slide, Sarah. So some of the ideas around next steps that we're proposing moving forward is really to finalize the learning brief that we want to launch with feedback from partners on this call and other areas. Focusing on large protracted crises where we have so many children who are affected by emergencies, really focusing on supporting collective efforts by our UN, INGO, and other partners to scale up some of the more promising solutions we're working to identify, and really looking at identifying, if possible, what is a coherent approach that we can collectively work towards in assessments and EI settings and scaling up some of these solutions. And of course, other possible next steps that we would love to hear from colleagues through the breakout rooms to feed into actions moving forward. So if we go to the next slide, so it is then just a thank you, of course, and this is presentation just offers a flavor of what we've been working on. And I won't go into too much detail, but the idea is that through today's discussions, we will get feedback from colleagues to really help us move this forward so we can collectively work to address the learning crisis. So on that note, and without too much further ado, and to keep us moving, maybe let me hand it over then to my colleague Carolyn, who has been working on the toolbox to improve holistic learning measurement in emergency settings. Now for a short presentation from her and to give us a sense of what our colleagues there have been working on. So Carolyn, over to you.
Thanks very much, Nevin, and good afternoon from Nairobi. Good evening. So our goal with this toolbox, and this is for the first slide, please, is really to provide a comprehensive set of resources, but really beyond that, to offer very practical solutions to education practitioners to improve the monitoring of education outcomes, and with a focus on holistic learning in emergencies and protracted crisis. And really, this is aimed at strengthening our own capacity, so the capacity of UNICEF education staff, but really also the capacity of ministries of education, of implementing partners that are working in these crises and low capacity contexts. Now, the tool was initially designed with a focus on sub-Saharan Africa. It's got many examples from this context. However, it can also be used in fragile and low capacity settings outside of this region. So really it's aimed at having global relevance as well. Slide 2, please. So this, you must have seen this before. This is really just to give you a sense of the context that we're dealing with in sub-Saharan Africa. So on the slide, you see the learning trajectories that show the evolution of the percentage of children with basic reading skills as they progress through the grades. So these are learning trajectories from mixed data. And the dotted line on the top represents the target for SDG 4.1.1, which is basic reading skills by the end of grade 3 for all children. And as you can see very clearly, in protracted crisis, in this context in sub-Saharan Africa, most learning trajectories remain very flat and then pick up the pace very late. And they, of course, remain far from reaching the 100%. Next slide, please. So with this solutions toolbox, ultimately, we hope to help reorient and to help pivot EIE programming towards learning. And accordingly, we formulated the following key monitoring question, which the toolbox aims to help in addressing. And that is, which mix of interventions is most likely to yield the largest learning gains at scale in each crisis? At what conditions, why, and at what cost? Next slide, please. The toolbox has been informed by good international practice of learning assessments and of the latest evidence on the drivers of learning. It's consistent with several regional but also global initiatives to improve learning measurements. And just to pick out one which is particularly important in framing this toolbox. So on the slide, you see the Learning Data Compact framework developed by UNICEF, UNESCO, and the World Bank. And really the key idea here is that tracking learning from summative assessments alone won't be enough to counter a learning crisis of such proportions. And therefore, a three-pronged approach is proposed. The first pillar looks at evidence on the ability of an education system to deliver learning. So that's through summative assessments. Pillar 2 is then an understanding or evidence on the underlying drivers of learning in crisis contexts. And importantly, pillar 3 then opens up the black box of the classroom via formative assessments to then implement tailored instruction techniques targeted to the level of the child, so teaching at the right level, etc. Slide 5, please. So with all of this, you probably ask yourself, what will this toolbox actually enable me to do in a crisis setting, very practically speaking? And so we've tried to break this down, formulating a number of common measurement problems that arise in crisis settings, in low capacity settings. And you see this in the column on the left side. And then we provided some solutions that the toolbox seeks to offer on the right side. And I'll just pick out a few of them before handing over to Matteo. So firstly, let's say I need to improve my results frameworks or my country program to include better measurement of learning outcomes. So here the toolkit provides step-by-step guidance, resources, practical examples, and also templates to build learning-oriented theories of change and results frameworks. Secondly, in my country, there's no holistic assessment framework, and hence we don't actually know what to measure. And so here the toolbox comes in and offers guidance on building assessment frameworks. There's lots of examples and case studies from the region that can help you to do so. Another issue is, let's say I need to run a summative assessment and I don't actually know what tools to use. And here we offer a comparative review of instruments for holistic learning assessments in crisis. And then lastly, let's say that I want to understand classroom dynamics within a remedial education initiative, but I don't really know where to start. And so the solutions toolbox here provides technical guidance, but also examples to develop monitoring plans for remedial interventions in crisis. So it's really very practical. And then, of course, there's many more that are offered in this toolbox, and I'd like to invite you to browse through it yourself, and hopefully you will find something useful for your own context. So I'd like to now hand over to Matteo, our SRO consultant, to provide a bit more detail on the toolbox resources and how they're also being employed in selected countries in our region. So thanks very much, and over to Matteo.
Thank you, Caroline. Next slide, please. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. In the next slide, you will see a provisional structure of this toolbox, which is still in alpha version. And basically, it's set out in 4 stages. And I really invite everyone to think critically and provide us with feedback if you can, or even with resources if you think that you have some star approach that could fit well within our toolbox. The idea is to take the different practitioners at different levels, and also ministerial counterparts, through a number of stages to go from designing an assessment to reporting and using the data to actually influence programming at the nexus, but also to hopefully improve policy in EIE. The idea here is that every stage has a technical guidance note. Every stage is built around a set of technical guidance notes that link to different tools, templates, case studies, and they really help you from designing the actual research design, for example, by understanding trade-offs, for example, from trying to set up a longitudinal design or cross-sectional design. Do you need, for example, to run assessments at in place in person, or can you do so remotely? At what conditions? What are the best practices by doing that? You will also have guidance on how to build instruments specific to emergency settings. That means with very low levels of capacity. It means you have to probably test children with a very short attention span for whatever reason. You may incur into floor effects with a lot of children scoring 0 or near 0. So what do you do in those circumstances? So that's kind of the twist that we try to give to this toolbox. And we hope to also, finish with a few lessons on how to use this learning data to improve teaching, improve programming at the nexus, and improving policy, as I said. Next slide, please. By actually reviewing the literature and speaking to different sets of practitioners in the region, which we've now done for a few months, we could categorize different types of assessments. I've categorized them here in two categories, and they have some things in common and some things that are particularly different. So in a first category, you will see some learning assessments with a rush design. The involvement of the counterpart happens late or in a fragmented manner. The assessment is often just academic and not social emotional. Contractors are hired with relatively little experience. The piloting is rushed. And these assessments end up having limited ownership and not really having an effect on systems building. So when we talk about a transition, pivoting of the whole subsector towards learning as a measure of effectiveness, then we want to move away from this type of tick a box assessment, whereby we're just ticking a box. We're just measuring for the sake of measuring, or measuring because a donor wanted a certain report at a point in time. On the other hand, we see some assessments that are really thought through, that reflect lessons from previous assessments in the country. They are holistic in nature, recognizing the potential and the importance of social emotional learning. They are developed with good design, strong terms of reference. So, contractors are hired with extensive experience. They are well planned. The enumerator training is nice and selective. And so these are the assessments that really take us to a different level of understanding of assessment in that country. So we try and reflect in the toolbox lessons from category 1 assessment to orient the practitioner towards category 2 type assessment, so the virtuous one, so to speak. So on that note, once again, I invite feedback on behalf of everybody. Thanks for listening. And I look forward to hearing from you. Next slide, please, with our contact information. These are our emails. Please do get in touch in case you have feedback, questions, or if you want to share any resource that you think should be included in this toolbox. Thanks again for listening. Over to you.
Thanks, Matteo, and thank you, Carolyn, and congratulate you because you were exactly on time. So well done. So Kirsten, maybe I'll hand over to you now. Over to you, Kirsten. Thanks so much.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening all. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about Save the Children's implementation of catch-up clubs across a range of countries and contexts, and we have a growing evidence base of what the results are in emergency and crisis contexts. We have evidence of the impact on foundational literacy and social emotional learning, and we'll soon have evidence on foundational numeracy as well. But today we're going to focus on literacy gains in Myanmar and Uganda. Next slide, please. Catch-up clubs are designed to provide a community-based accelerated gain for children alongside school or during the holidays, and they're designed to produce learning gains in 13 weeks for those who've had the greatest disruptions in their learning. There's 4 core components to these. One is a fun-based remedial learning and engaging an approach. The second is grouping children by ability, not by age, level learning, as we've heard talked about, similar to the Taro model. The third is case management support, to really link these children to social services and support needs for protection and to support their attendance and mitigation of dropout. This is really critical in the kind of context that we're talking about. The fourth is a cash voucher or similar cash support system for the households where the economic barriers to attending education opportunities are the highest. These consist of 3 rounds across a 13-week cycle, 3 rounds of clubs and of tuition. And we collect data between those to direct both the facilitators and the children's learning. Next slide, please. So in Myanmar, we've been implementing catch-up clubs in Cayenne and Rakhine states, reaching over 3,000 children, and 45% of these are girls. These include children in conflict-affected and IDP communities in central Rakhine, in conflict-affected villages in Cayenne and host communities near conflict-affected areas in central Rakhine and Cayenne. Our colleagues in Myanmar who produced the report and findings couldn't be on the call today, but they are named on the following slide. Next slide, please. So you'll see these results. We're seeing that nearly 80% of children in these catch-up clubs are attaining the higher literacy levels, story and comprehension level. A significantly higher proportion of catch-up club children than those who are not in the catch-up clubs are achieving higher reading levels. The average effect was measured from the mean value of the literacy level score, and on average, participation in the catch-up clubs could result in an effect size of almost improving a whole level per child. The challenges that we're still facing are around supporting children to reach that comprehension level. And the data demonstrates that the higher the foundational literacy level, sentence story at the start, the less likely the child is to progress through the whole level, which is where that reduction is coming from, or slightly less than one level. This isn't surprising as the difficulty or complexity of the reading skills does increase at these higher levels. Next slide, please. We also found that catch-up club learners were more than twice as likely to reach the highest level, which is really significant compared to those not gaining, and nearly 8 times more likely to progress their reading by one level. The reading gains were equitable for girls and boys, which was very encouraging. However, a Rohingya child was less likely to attain reading comprehension than others, and we're looking into the equity ramifications of these. I'm just going to hand over to Ignatius, who's going to present the findings from Uganda, and then we'll share some summary learning. Ignatius, over to you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Good evening, everyone from Uganda. This is Ignatius, and continuing with where Kirsten has stopped, we are still implementing our catch-up clubs in a refugee context, and we are implementing and reaching up 4,793 children, of which about 2,400 are girls and then 22 are boys. We are happy that we are able to reach more girls through this intervention. We do this in 3 refugee settlements, that is in Western Uganda, and we mainly support refugees coming in from neighboring countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, and because of the conflicts that are going on that side. Let's move to the next slide. Yes, we have already registered results, as you can see being projected. Children that are participating in the catch-up clubs are doing much, much better, and they are learning faster than those that are not in the catch-up clubs. Already you can see that children, about close to 86% of the children that are in catch-up clubs have improved from one level of reading, as compared to about 26% for those children who are not in catch-up clubs. Children in the catch-up clubs have also gone ahead to those who remained at the same level as compared to those that are outside the catch-up clubs. You see 14% only remained, whereas those that are not being exposed to catch-up clubs, over 70% didn't progress to the next level. So we continue to see those benefits, and you see only 3.3% of children who are outside catch-up clubs were able to achieve grade 2 of reading proficiency, as compared to 38.8 those that are exposed to catch-up clubs. So we find this to be a very good way of providing remedial learning to learners, and as overall we are seeing over 60% of children improving, and all this improvement that I have talked about, 60% is attributed to the interventions that we have under the catch-up clubs. Next slide. Yes, we continue to see that the catch-up clubs are gender sensitive, and as I mentioned before, we continue to reach out to more girls which is really important because they are a special category of people that are prone to dropping out. So we see that more girls are reaching out, receiving education, and now they are having an ability to continue in school and continue learning. And as you can see still there in the slides, we have been able to reach about 400 in Nachi Valley settlement. Ramwanja is 407, but in Changwali settlement, we are seeing a bit low enrollment, but we are doing our best to ensure that those students who qualify to be catch-up clubs, we extended a service to them. We also see that as we roll out these catch-up clubs, we don't only target refugees, but all, because we want to integrate it. But so we target refugees and nationals. And over the people we reached out, we can see 67% were for Ugandan learners or nationals, as compared to the 57%. And you see, we also reached out. The findings indicate that we are registering more progress under for children who are under AEP, which is Accelerated Education Program, in level 2. And then those who are in primary 5 are also benefiting as compared to the rest of the learners. So still we are happy that we are reaching out to those children who are prone to drop out because they are failing to learn. So AEP are benefiting, and primary 5, for bringing in that context, primary 5 is like, and primary 6, they are considered to be higher levels of primary school. So if children are not learning that category, they can easily drop out. So catch-up clubs are helping us to keep these children in school. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Great, thanks, Ignatius. And the next slide, please. So just to say, what we are finding is that what is working is embedding effective and regular learning data collection systems, as Rod mentioned at the start, and analyzing and using that data and supporting community facilitators or teachers in between those rounds to strengthen and address issues. Thirdly, it's embedding that case management support to really help those most at risk and to improve attendance. Fourthly, it's including that cash assistance for those who are most likely to have difficulties attending due to economic barriers. And fifthly, it's the tailored support for girls, whether it be dignity kits, focus girls club support, or support for the children of teenage mothers. Finally, next slide. There are some key learnings that we want to take away and just highlight. One is that consistent attendance is much more challenging in these settings still with this wraparound support than we find in other settings, in the more development settings that many of us work in, for various reasons: economic, transport, weather related. 2, challenges of concentration and tiredness for children due to hunger remains a challenge, even though we look to address it. 3rd is the multiple language context that many of these children, particularly in like the Uganda situation, are facing, and so looking at language grouping as well. 4th is that even with targeted support for the follow-up of girls and supporting their attendance, there are additional challenges they face, and there needs to be ongoing support and adaptation for their needs. And finally, these catch-up clubs are generally costing more. We're trying to look at value for money and costs of $50 per child, but they are costing in Uganda more in the refugee context than in the development, but we're still doing our global analysis. So here's to come, but because of the extra support required, we are seeing that slightly drives up the cost. Thank you for listening, and over to you, Nevin.
Thanks so much, Kirsten, for the wonderful presentation. Maybe let me jump straight then to Camila and Ines from NRC. So Camila, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Niven, and good afternoon to all. In the next slide, we're going to focus now on psychosocial support and social emotional learning, specifically looking into the NRC's program called the Better Learning Program. Now, the aim of this program is for children who have gone through high levels of stress, trauma, displacement, to regain lost learning capacity. It is based on the 5 recovery research principles that you can see there in those pictures. The principle of being able to calm down, providing a sense of safety and stability, and the power to change a situation, connecting with others, and reestablishing hope. This program was developed approximately 11 years ago with the University of Tromsø, and it's a phased approach. So if you think about the traffic lights, you can see there the green, the yellow, and the red intervention. We start with the Better Learning Program 1, which is for teachers, a general classroom-based psychosocial support approach, targeting all children and young people at any stage of emergency, focusing on techniques to improve focus and concentration. Then we move into a more targeted group intervention for children who are underachieving, focusing on learning outcomes and working on the executive functions. And then the red one is the specialized one for counselors and psychologists who have been trained to deal with group or individual sessions, looking into addressing trauma-induced nightmares that are one of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, today, what we would like to present is this 10-year journey from a country office perspective. So Marco will talk from Gaza and showing the case of Palestine. And then Ines will then look into the regional scale up. And then it will come back to me to talk about the global rollout. So over to Marco in Gaza, hoping that internet keeps working.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Camilla. Hello, everyone from Gaza. So BLP started in Gaza in 2011. Gaza was really the area office where everything started with the Better Learning Program, specifically on specialized work on regular nightmares. The journey in Palestine started around 11 years ago, and the new manuals were then developed between 2012 and 2013, and that was the time when we started with the scale up. The scale up in Gaza worked in very strict and close coordination with the UNRWA and in West Bank, the Ministry of Education schools. 2016, 2017, that is the time when we start building capacities within the Ministry of Education and UNRWA, creating master trainers on a Better Learning Program. So we started looking at a long-term work with the Ministry of Education to start building this relationship on having Better Learning Program integrated within their school schedules. And NSC signed first MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding with the Ministry of Education, to work together on the development of a first institutionalization framework. The framework was designed to integrate the Better Learning Program within the Palestinian education system. 2020-2023 trainings have been carried on by NRC between Gaza and West Bank. We achieved a total of 2,159 teaching and non-teaching staff trained on all the 3 different levels of Better Learning Program, working then with the teachers and the counselors. From this year, and the plan for from now to 2025 is now to start a formalization of this process that was already started since 2019. Next slide, please. So what are the factors that are contributing and have contributed to the national scale up? The national scale up is directly linked with the institutionalization and directly linked with numerous researches that NRC conducted and has been conducting in Palestine to show the effectiveness of the Better Learning Program, the impact and the results on how a Better Learning Program is probably helping and supporting children at the different levels, but also teachers to address psychosocial support directly to children during their classes and enhance counselor skills on a specific niche, which is regular nightmares. The Better Learning Program level 3, which is the one related to regular nightmares, is been also contextualized to be used across all UNRWA schools. So together, NRC and UNRWA, they have worked in pair to develop contextualized content that today still used by UNRWA within their schools. The same process was also initiated for the different 2 more levels with the Ministry of Education in Palestine. Participation of Ministry of Education and cluster partners also in the development of the Better Learning Program institutionalization framework has been key as a part of the process. So multiple stakeholders have contributed on input and feedback on what should have been the shape of the institutionalization framework. And today we have finalized a toolkit of institutionalization that was started in Gaza but completed also in West Bank with endorsement also from the Ministry of Education, providing tools in collaboration with the Ministry of Education, during which work plans, action points, and future plans have been agreed to then develop together a technical committee and form a technical committee that could take lead through the process from now to the future. And this is where we are right now. We are very closely working with the Ministry of Education to operationalize what the toolkit is now helping us and guide us through the process. That's all for my presentation, and I will hand over now to my colleague Ines.
Thank you very much, Marco. And can you please show the next slide? So at the regional level for the BLB scale-up within the Miro region, by the end of 2015, Jordan implemented a contextualized BLB BSS community-based approach run by refugee in non-formal setting in camps, including Zaatari, Azra, and Emirates camp. The BLB was later rolled out into Iraq and Libya country offices. A large scale-up and institutionalization processes inside the formal system carried out in Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. And the main factors contributed to the BLB scalability are the establishment of the regional hubs, including BLB staff, mastery trainers from NRC and Ministry of Education, and the BLB champions who have been actively engaged in a BLB community of practice. And also the massive on-job coaching, capacity building, and emotional supervision delivered to frontline staff with a sense of ownership from refugees community who really believed that BLB could make difference in their lives and their children's. Next slide, please. As for the impact of the BLB, here is a snapshot on the impact of the BLB in Miro region. And it's worth mentioning that virus researches, evaluations, and after action review results clearly indicated a strong and long-lasting positive impact of BLB, and also indicated that BLB has shown to positively improve student well-being and learning outcomes. As you can see, out of total of 617 children in Jordan participated in the BLB program, 78% saw an improvement in their study skills after participating in the BLB. And in Palestine, out of 4,660 children, 91% reported an improvement in their well-being after receiving BLB. In Lebanon, for the sum of 3,319 children, 72% reported feeling more hopeful after the BLB. Additionally, data from 10 country offices show improved well-being for teachers and interaction between parents and teachers. And on average, 2/3 of children who participated in the BLB3 sessions go down from 4 to 5 nightmares to 0 nightmares. Over to Camilla. Thank you very much.
Yes, and I know we are running out of time, so the next slide, I will skip it. It just shows the processes needed to institutionalize programs and how long it takes and how many actors and partners are needed. And I'll just go into my last slide to close by saying that from a global perspective, so you've seen from Marco and Ines, the research has been instrumental and it's very much needed to prove and showcase programs such as BOP. The increase and need of mental health PSS after COVID-19, we're all aware of that. And the fact that we are now aiming to reach 500,000 children. So we're looking forward to working with all of you to achieve this goal. Over to you, Nevin. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Camila, and thanks, colleagues, for the wonderful and very rich presentation that really does underscore why this is such an important set of issues to address to support learning for children in humanitarian context. So on that note, I want to thank all of the presenters for the excellent presentations that have really helped frame the discussion effectively. And let me hand over now to Sarah to shift us into the breakout rooms with our lovely facilitators who will work with colleagues in those rooms. So Sarah, over to you. Thanks so much, Sarah. Wonderful. And I see, are we getting our colleagues back in the main room now? Have they finished?
Yes, everyone is back in the room.
Excellent. Okay. Well, so thanks so much, colleagues. I jumped into a couple of the different breakout rooms during the discussions and heard lively feedback being provided by colleagues, so really reflecting the level of excitement and energy and commitment everyone has around this agenda. Maybe what we can do, a quick roundtable to our facilitators for 2 or 3 minutes, maybe preferably 2 minutes, for any quick reflections or takeaways from you from the respective breakout rooms. So maybe first I'll go to you, Yodit, if you can share with us a few key takeaways on how the discussion went. Over to you, Yodit.
Okay, thank you, Nevin. We got some diverse input. I'm sure some of them they are already captured in the Jamboard, but I will highlight some of the examples. One example is focusing on the school readiness, which on the accelerated school readiness program in humanitarian context, an example from Ethiopia. And the good thing is this has been also used by multiple countries, and it can easily or contextually adapted, as well as also cost effective. And it could be a very good example at early level. And then when it comes to the primary level or at early grades, we have examples of radio in education in Cameroon. And also there was an example stated by our colleague from Nigeria, which focuses on literacy, basic literacy, but also including some life skills education as well, in terms of especially the overage children to acquire skills to address some issues. Another example that we have from Pakistan is focusing more on coming up with a toolkit where it gives responsibility for both teachers and students on how to manage the sessions, a lot of flexibility, as well as also for students to be responsible for their work, especially when it comes mathematics or numeracy level, having homeworks and delivering according to that, but the toolkit was found to be useful. Then just as part of the question 2, which on how partners could collaborate in terms of bringing the solution for the learning crisis, the example which is done by INE in terms of the regional workshop, which was hosted last year, and which is also going to mobilize partnership in terms of policy as well as practice. This is something to be replicated. And it was also mentioned that all the resources are available in the website, which colleagues from different organizations could also learn. I think this is what I can say from this discussion, though the time was very short.
No, thank you, Yodit. I mean, excellent takeaways and really useful contributions from colleagues. And you did a great job summarizing less than 3 minutes, 2 minutes. You were right on target. So thank you for that. And that was, of course, for the foundational literacy and numeracy breakout group. Maybe I can now switch to you, Asim, who led the breakout group discussion for social and emotional learning. So Asim, over to you, and your challenge is 2 minutes. Over to you.
Thanks, Nevin. So we started off discussing how the Better Learning program was contextualized during COVID. And from the slides, we saw that there was an uptick right after pandemic, the program. So Kamala shared that radio as a tool was effectively utilized, for scaling it up immediately. And research is still ongoing, so they're still collecting a lot of data in terms of, what the actual impact, especially during pandemic, has been of the program. So we started off discussing that. And in terms of, highlighting programs and solutions, so members shared that definitely radio is one of the cheapest and most effective ways. And definitely if combined with other solutions at the same time, so the compounding impact of, low-cost solutions like radio or other low-cost programs is a lot. So a lot of people stressed about the need to streamline such programs. Then home-based learning in times of emergency, the importance of that was shared. Rachel shared an interesting example of utilizing operationalizing SEL in distance education environments. So the INE's distance education toolkit that has a lot of examples which can be referred to, during emergencies like pandemics. And yeah, and on the next question, like what do we see as key next steps to generate concrete action? So members highlighted the need of partnerships, consortiums, and the availability of multi-year unrestricted funds. So the importance of these aspects was highlighted. And last but not the least, we discussed the importance of, highlighting interventions which don't work. So a lot of research is being done, but I think it's the group felt that it's important to highlight the interventions which don't work. And Julius raised a very important point that, now I think there is a consensus in the field that one global SEL framework does not work. And we've reached this conclusion after a lot of research in the last years. So the frameworks, wherever they've been designed, they need to be contextualized and they need to take the individual dynamics and the context into consideration. So yes, so these were some of the highlights from our section. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asim. Really excellent contributions from the SEL breakout room participants as well. So really hugely appreciated. Very good inputs. Maybe in the interest of time, I'll shift over to you, Deepa, to provide us key takeaways from the learning assessment breakout room discussion. Over to you, Asim.
Yeah. Thank you. I think in our group, there were around 11 people, and we were again trying to look at what are the programs we heard during the presentations. And a lot of ideas were around how to really, continue structured pedagogy. I mean, how to use radios, tablets, catch-up clubs, and remedial education programs, support on monitoring and evaluation, and digitalizing the resources available came up very strongly during the discussion, and a lot of country-specific examples. But I think what is also important is how to take this forward. So one of the main point which came out is, of course, one size doesn't fix all. So we need to develop or adapt the assessment tools into country context to capture the learning outcomes. And also we have to develop the capacity of government to continue non-formal education, catch-up programs, as well as assessment. So this I would like to summarize that this were the main points which came out of the third group. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Deepa. Wonderful and very to the point and succinct. So, and I see there is also some really interesting chat and questions in the chat box, which we will pull together and provide responses to in more detail. You know, for example, Mohammed's question about economic challenges and child labor in Pakistan. So quite a lot of solutions of that for that, but certainly an issue we all are very concerned about. So we now have remaining 4 minutes in our webinar, and we have scheduled Dean for closing remarks and summary, and we are fortunately almost on time. So Dean, you do have a few minutes to share with us any key takeaways and provide us with a good steer. So over to you, Dean.
Okay, thank you, Nevin, and everybody. Just you know, a couple of reflections. I think today was just a great example of an interagency approach where technical experts are coming together and really looking at solutions, going back to Rob's comments there at the beginning. One thing I was thinking about as I was listening is really encouraging all of you to join the INEE communities of practice, because that's where we can continue to build on these discussions. I feel like we just, you know, touched on all the great activities and work that's happening out there. And the communities of practice is a forum for INEE members to really engage at this technical level. Because I see some of these questions and there's more questions coming, and just that excitement, you know, how do we keep moving? Because this is really about delivering on INEE's mandate and mission, which is making sure that all individuals access their right to a quality, safe, relevant, equitable education. And that's what we're talking about today. So very excited that UNICEF opened up this opportunity. Also very excited to see the learning brief finalized so that we can make sure that it gets out there for everyone. And today's event is contributing to that. So with that, I just would like to thank everyone for their time. It's so valuable. And we covered some really great ground today, I would say. And really looking forward to the follow-up to all that was started. Thank you, Nevin, and thank you to everybody on the call.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you, colleagues. And also from our side, really expressing our deepest appreciation and thanks. And this is only the beginning of a really important journey together, and we will definitely be pushing this forward in collaboration with all of you. So thank you so much. Have a great day, and we will certainly be sharing resources from today's discussions with colleagues as well. Thanks so much, colleagues. Have a good one.
Bye-bye all.